Good evening. Today is Monday, November 1st, 2021, and the school committee meeting will be called to order at 5:35 p.m. with the Pledge of Allegiance. So to our two members who are coming in remote tonight, unless you're speaking, if you could keep your mics muted, that would be appreciated. And part of the, is it procedural rules or governing rules?
For public meetings, whenever possible, people should have their cameras.
Janet, we will need you to turn your camera on if possible, as soon as possible. Agenda item number 2 is school committee member introductions. We'll begin with Ms. Paquette.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2. I am a little under the weather tonight, guys, so I'm joining you from bed.
Geneva Larita, Ward 3.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Megan Parks at large.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6.
Paul Beaupalant, Ward 7.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the introduction of the new Assistant Director of Adult Education. Superintendent Langlis.
Yeah, I'd like to call up Director Jen Tyner to do a quick introduction. So this position has been approved because Razel was not available, but it did want to give you a chance, both you and community, to say hello and get a little introduction from Director Tyner.
Is that on? Yes. Okay. Hello, it is my pleasure to introduce Razel Ward to you this evening. Razel will join the Lewiston Adult Education Leadership Team as the new Assistant Director in December. Razel has worked in the field of adult education since 2003. With a background in social work, she understands the barriers that our adult learners face, and she is skilled in designing programs that support self-sufficiency through education and training. Razel began her work in MSAD 52 as the lead adult education teacher, and she advanced to the director position in 2009. In this capacity, she has developed tremendous expertise in program administration, program development, and customer service. Razel currently serves on the Central Western Maine Workforce Development Board and the Maine Adult Education Association Board. In 2019, she was chosen as the Adult Education Administrator of the Year in recognition of her commitment, passion, and leadership. For the past 8 years, I've had the opportunity to work with Razel as part of our regional hub, and I can share from my personal experience that her leadership in the field is commendable and that she is student-centered to her core. Please help me welcome Razel Ward to Lewiston. Razel.
I feel like I've won an Emmy or something. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to be able to take what I've learned over the years, bring it to Lewiston, support a lot of the programs that are here already, and hopefully even kick them up a notch and do some great things for the community of Lewiston.
Thank you very much.
And I was warned that you might have questions.
I would just say welcome. I don't think they're going to ask you any tough questions tonight, but they might.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Oh, is it part of the consent agenda? Never mind. Okay, welcome. Oh, yes, okay. Agenda item number 4 is the consent agenda. Are there any items that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Agenda item number 5 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now or on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
My name's Jennifer Desjardins. I live at 10 to Ford Street in Lewiston, and I have children from McMahon School, Lewiston Middle School, and I have a senior at Lewiston High School. Unfortunately, I never wanted to be the one to bring up this topic or non-agenda item into the school board. By definition, bullying means to seek harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. By definition, the word harassment means aggressive, pressure, or intimidation. 5 years ago, when I had a child in the middle school, I was told that bullying is 3 or more times of unwanted behavior to another student. Since September of this year, I've tried to reach out to LMS multiple times of bullying and harassment. I have left voicemails and never received a call back. I finally sent an email to Lewiston Public School admin team and the team leader of Team Voyager. At that time, I was told by an LPS admin that the voicemails had been lost, and that's why I never received a phone call back. I emailed back and forth at this time with the LPS admin as well as the team leader, and things seemed to calm down a little bit. The past week, I reached out again. I left a voicemail and received a call back from an LPS or Lewiston Middle School guidance counselor. After going on about how my daughter has been threatened to be jumped and told to kill herself on a regular basis in this school, we also discussed a couple other issues, such as my daughter being called white privileged on a regular basis. I quote, the guidance counselor says, "I am white and I feel privileged." She then goes on to tell me that the school is not biased, that everything is equal, and that everything's equal and not privileged. So if each student is not privileged, why is my daughter being called this? They are all given access to the internet, a Chromebook, teachers, guidance counselors, staff. My daughter brought to the school's attention how she's called a cracker and white privileged. To me, this is not okay for anybody to be called. Using one's race against them should not be tolerated, no matter what color you are. If a student was being called names based on body size, shape, color of your hair, sexual orientation, personal appearance, financial status, at any time, this is also bullying and should be dealt with. And it should not be the student that is being bullied that is put into ISS and separated from their peers. They're already losing class time from being in the office, and they're already being threatened and intimidated. My child and other children are being bullied and harassed and miss countless hours of school. If a student is not able to be in a classroom, they're not getting a fair education. The school is asked to go through her phone. They don't believe her. A student should not need to prove that they are being harassed. A lot of these kids are not going to tell us, an administrator, yes, I said this to another student, because they know they're going to be in trouble. Today, again, my child was in the office because of threats and feeling unsafe in school. On a call with the counselor and the admin, I was told there is no proof that my daughter is being threatened or told to kill herself. These threats have not happened through text message or social media, as my daughter is not allowed to have Instagram or Facebook. We know these students are not going to be honest with administrative about bullying the other students and threatening harm. I've asked multiple times what is being done to keep my child safe. And on multiple times I've been told, I cannot tell you what is going to happen with the other student. I have not asked about the other student. I asked about my child. I do not know what steps are being taken to ensure my child's safety during the school day and that she has access to public education. Today, again, I asked an admin what is being done to keep my child safe. And she instructed the guidance counselor to hang up the phone. I was hung up on by a Lewiston Middle School administrative personnel and a counselor because we did not agree on how this is being handled. And I still do not know what is going to be put in place to keep her safe. Lewiston Public Schools says that they have a zero tolerance policy for bullying. So if this is true, why am I on a daily basis trying to protect my daughter?
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Person. Okay,
Sorry.
yeah. Okay. I'll put it back on after, but I'm kind of 6 feet away. So my name is Gabriel Cody. Many of you already know me. I've taught in the Lewiston School Department for 22 years. And I've taught at Montello for 18. In the middle of that, I taught 2 years at the day treatment wing. And I just finished working, a year and a half or so at Lewiston Middle School. And I'm upset because the climate is really bad. Obviously, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I left. Last Friday was my last day. I took care of myself. And although now I'm teaching special ed pre-K kids in the city. It's just, I know people have written you letters and other people have talked, but I just think it's important to know that it's bad. Teachers, my friends, are afraid to go to work. The kids are afraid. There's fights almost every single day. And I talk to people, Karen and Jake know that I know all kinds of people in all the schools. So it's not just about where I just came from, but it's crazy. It's madness. My sister's here. She 4'11". She's an ed tech at the high school, and she witnessed a horrible, what she calls a pummeling when she was subbing in a room. A child came to the door, blew by her, completely pummeled the child that was sitting down. And she, of course, was very upset, tried to get the kid off, couldn't, screamed for help. The staff came in after he had thrown the kid on the floor and was punching and punching. This is in a classroom. These things happen. And it's incredible. A big, and I don't mean large, I mean, the guy works out every day, teacher broke up a fight and he got punched in the head and it broke his glasses. And I'm thinking, what's happening? This is at school. Another teacher broke up a fight, brought a kid to the side, and the other kid kept punching and punching and punching and was hitting the teacher in the head and on the side of her face. And I just think something needs to be done. I don't know what. I'm here to tell you that I don't have the answers, but we need to do something. We need to, I don't know, step out of the box and do something. I don't know if there's COVID money, we can get more SROs for right now, and we can't wait. We can't wait to do something. I know 2 teachers right now that said, Gabe, I'm leaving this year. And I'm like, and that was last week, and it was only October. And they're not at the school that I came from. They're not LMS teachers. They're other friends of mine. They said, we can't do this anymore. I'll read you a quote that was on Facebook. I know some of you hate it. I love it. I get rid of all the negativity, except I read this the other day. And it says, after my students leave school, I just sit still for an hour to recover from the trauma. That was a post that she thought about, that she typed, that she hit send, and it was on her Facebook. And I got in touch with her this afternoon because I said, hey, I'd like to share your post. And she said, you can, but this was her response. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, she said, you can mention that after school hours. I want to meet with my students and correct papers, but I'm triaging parent phone calls that go past my contractual time. And she said something about these are things that she had hoped would have already been taken care of. But there's so much going on. It's crazy. The kids are outside in the morning and they fight in the morning if that school hasn't even started yet. Or they come in and they start fighting, or in the bathroom. And this is the last story I'll tell you, and then I'll say goodnight. A young lady at the middle school that I've known since she was a baby said, I was in the hallway. She said, Mrs. Cody, can you help me? Of course. What do you need? She goes, can you block the bathroom door? And I said, yeah, I'll stand here and make sure nobody goes in. And she said, no, can you block the door? And I said, don't worry, I'm right here. Nobody's gonna go in the bathroom. And she took me by the shoulders and she turned me around and she said, you need to stand right here just like that, except she said, spread your legs out. And I thought, we're not in jail. This poor child was so afraid to go to the bathroom that I had to do that. So I don't have the answers, but we need to find some. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Any online attendees that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 6, to review and discuss Lewiston Capital Improvement Plan. Superintendent Langlis will present.
I know from public session, we don't do interactive back and forth, but I want to thank both the speakers tonight, and we'll certainly be following up on everything they shared. The LCIP memo that was in the packet just talks about process and the work that we have to do. Last year, this was something that the window crept up on us, and we didn't have a chance to get good input from the committee. So we wanted to make sure we got ahead of it a bit this year and shared some things. So Member Potvin may chime in at some point, or Member Hawkins or Mr. Beauplant, who are members of the facilities subcommittee. And we did have a discussion about this, but I wanted to share some things with the larger committee so we can make sure we have some good direction as we move forward. Last year, the city of Lewiston taxpayers and with the city council and then taxpayers voted a $27 million capital improvement fund. And that fund is approved to address concerns across the entire city. And this was a conversation that we had here at the school department that about $5 million worth of that was agreed to at the school level. And the school system has a large number of assets, as you know, but also that large number of assets, they need maintenance and attention and repair. And so as we go into our budget season, which is really starting up already, we have LCIP requests that need to be before the city before too long, and we need to have some process here to vote on that. There's things that leave us concerned from a maintenance perspective. I've had a preliminary conversation with Josh Bro, our facilities director, who's raised some things, but I also wanted to share, as you can see in the memo, the excerpt from the LCIP plan. But we really need to have a comprehensive plan to move forward with our facilities. So I want to put it before you that while it may not go in the capital improvement plan, I'd like to set forth a budget and find an organization that can appropriately assess our facilities and give us a multi-year projection. Also looking at the building and grounds, not just maintenance, but upgrades to things like trim, paint, lighting, et cetera. There's some of our schools when you pull up, and I'm not saying all the money should go into curb appeal, but some of that curb appeal is lacking, but also it's because the trim boards are starting to go because the paint's peeling off and things of that nature that don't have huge cost to them per se, but could help keep a facility from really deteriorating quickly. We are looking at the use of ESSER funds for lots of HVAC systems, anything that we can use those funds for to help modernize our very, very old systems, we are doing. We are contemplating upgrades to the Dingley building, which if you don't know, that's where our central office is currently located. The basement is not finished. The ceilings on the top floor are actually falling in multiple locations. And we have efforts underway to fix the holes, but that can't come before the roof, which this committee has worked hard to appropriate to fix that roof. Between contractor shortages and increasing prices, it's been a challenge to get that work underway. But we've also outgrown it. We can't fit in our parking lot. We have purchased cubicles to divide up spaces that used to be conference rooms where we actually met to do work with teachers and other staff or families, just to try to make enough spaces for them. Spaces downstairs have been renovated to some extent to make them usable. And so you can see in the budget components for next year, there's additional funding for the Dingley building basement redesign effort. The real question that we have when we look at about $1 million for a roof, $500,000 for ventilation, $1.3 million for the basement, you start doing some math real quick and that building becomes very expensive to stay in. And those are some big ticket items that we've talked about, but there are other components that we need to consider as we go forward. We want to talk about what's the committee's will to investigate purchasing, leasing, or building a central office or some other plan, which opens up a much larger conversation around, and I'm not saying we can do this with this LCIP plan, but there's been some goodwill and some effort behind the idea of, I want to emphasize the idea of a 6, 7, 8 model for Lewiston middle school age students, which would provide more space in elementary schools, but we don't have the facility to do 6, 7, 8 at the middle school. So that would require an addition, which those grounds are not very spacious, but it's possible. Excuse me. Or require a different facility, which might accommodate a splitting of the middle school to have 2, 6, 7, 8 programs, which again, there are pros and cons to that. It's a conversation at this point. But all these things, including facilities upgrades that we know are needed, just from things that are cyclical to things that have failed, are things that we consider when we look at the LCIP. This year, the biggest project that's ongoing, which both the facilities and the finance subcommittee have looked very closely at and have moved forward on, is the heating system, essentially at the middle school. That system is quite old. It is more than due for an upgrade, and I'm excited about that project and what that means. This spring, that will get started as soon as the heat comes off in the spring. They'll start dismantling everything they can, and then once summer comes, they'll have an effort to put in a new heating system, a new boiler plant at the middle school. Other projects, again, there were funds in here for ventilation, district-wide cameras, which were based on a security report and recommendations, paving, some roofing work at the middle school, which is a multi-year effort, Montello School roofing, which is a multi-year effort. And on the sheet, it spills into a second column that was shared that also includes some items at Longley, Dingley, Lewiston High School facilities, and we continue to look at other items. Another major project that we're looking at with the ESSER funds is the heating system at the high school has what they call pneumatic thermostats. And so there's a compressor that actually pushes air through the system. Bruce can probably articulate this much better than I can, but that system is, to my knowledge, original. It's when the school was built in 1973, I believe, was when that construction happened. And so that system, it fails in ways that there's no heat in some places, and the heat is always on in other places. And we are at the mercy of a compressor that you can't just buy a new one and replace because of the system. Not to mention the control panels that have other security issues from the world of cyberspace. And so that's a major project that we're looking at undertaking with ESSER funds. And there are numerous others. Right now, waiting on some different approvals, we're looking at as much as $20 million in federal relief funds being used to upgrade our facilities' mechanical systems. Those things will take time, and we're working on those. But to put it out to the committee and to see if anybody wanted to contribute from the public, what are things, thresholds, conversations, and maybe members of the facilities committee or the finance committee want to add for the LCIP proposal that we would then send to the city after a vote here? Just want to open it up for discussion at this point.
Member Potman?
Echoing what Jake said, on the finance committee, we took up a lot of discussion and a lot of the different projects, and we just reflected, how 2 years ago when we all came on board, I guess the void would be the word on addressing capital improvement. There really wasn't much of a plan. There was a couple items here and there. Usually it was always knee-jerk reaction when something needed emergency repair. And it's not the way it should run, and we've talked about this before. And I think this year is going to set a standard that from here on in, the school department has to be able to maintain a standard of being able to keep the facilities up where they should be. And the dollar figures of the past aren't going to do it. And Paul can speak to this over across the bridge, and I can, and we made mistakes and we paid the price for it. And Lewiston's in a little better shape because the buildings are newer for the most part, but you do have some aging buildings that need the TLC immediately. So the recommendation from the finance committee was that this request should stay aggressive and should address the biggest priorities. I think one way to look at it is who knows the buildings the best, but the building principal. And if those building principals submit needs to the administration, I think we should be able to create a priority list without having to, have outside entities come in and take a look at this. I mean, there's some obvious stuff. Now, granted, there's the behind the walls stuff that also needs to be investigated, but I think just to get going, to maintain a figure, a consistent figure, year in, year out, leading up to that 5-year capital improvement plan or even 10-year capital improvement plan. So I think that you have an opportunity here where I think we broke through last year, in helping the city understand the needs of the school department. So I think that's an opportunity that's here now that we shouldn't lose that opportunity. We should maintain it. and to keep it aggressive and address everything and not shrink back from it, because it's real easy to get into the budgetary arguments. Oh, we don't have the money. Keep in mind, last year, the school department got 20% of the CIP, and we maintain 55% of the assets of the city. 55%, and we get 20%. And there's something wrong with that, and it has to be corrected. And I think there's opportunity now to do that and send the message that, we understand what our needs are. We present the needs to you, and we're going to ask to support these needs and moving forward with that. So, our recommendation to Jake was to maintain the dollar figure that was presented last year. We have multitudes of millions of items millions of dollars of items that need done. So just to prioritize that, get to the point to be able to prioritize, but keep that figure where it's at, because quite frankly, it's beyond $5 million, but we're there at the 5 million mark. So what the future committee chooses to do, how much more aggressive or peel back, that's up to them. But as if for now, in establishing a framework, I think is important in the absence of a framework years prior.
Ms. Hawkins?
So in my own life, I focus very much on need versus want. I want that candy bar, but I actually need a meal, that sort of thinking. And going through this LCIP, talking with Mr. Damon and hearing from Josh and hearing from Jake and seeing some of the facilities that we're looking at and going, oh my God, that's still standing. What we're asking for with the LCIP and what the finance committee has put to Jake isn't a wish list of things we wish we could do. It's things that if we don't do, we'll be kicking ourselves for not doing in the relatively near future. I am not someone who likes to see that. I'm not a person who drives around with their check engine light on. It comes on, I go and find out why it's on. Because that car breaks down, I'm done. Much like if the heating plant at the middle school shuts down, middle school is done until it's back up. This isn't, we'd really like a brand new building. Yeah, sure we would. But right now we need to keep what we have in working order. And some of these systems we're working with, it's a day-to-day, is this going to keep working? The heating system at the high school, 73. It's now 2021. That's kind of scary to me that we've been working with the system that dated that long. It's still going. Thank you, whoever's smiling on us for that one. But that's a very outdated system that is obviously not going to be a quick fix. If we don't fix it, it is going to break worse than it already is. So I agree very much with Mr. Potvin. I know it's difficult to say to the city, you need to chip in. But if we can't keep these systems working, we can't provide schooling. It's that simple.
Thank you. Member Damon?
I think that, I absolutely, I've seen a lot of the LCIP over the years. Planning always has a chance to review it, and not to lay blame or to accuse anybody of it, but there were many years when the school department never presented anything for the LCIP. They just kind of let it go, which was a huge mistake. And there have been multiple directors of facilities that were here for a couple of years and then leave. And so it's all a new startup program with the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. I'm not blaming any of those folks. They did what they had to do while they were here. I think that some consistency that we have now with Josh is great. His whole perspective is different than several of the previous facilities coordinators, which I think is a real positive. And just to be clear, just some of the systems at the high school have been upgraded, but what hasn't been is what controls it. It's extremely energy inefficient when you turn the heat on in October and turn it off in May. And basically, you control the temperature by opening and closing windows. It's really not much of a control system. That pneumatic control system that's at the high school has been obsolete since the mid-'80s. Should have been replaced a long time ago. Some parts of the high school have had the control systems upgraded. But there are other parts of the whole control thing that, we don't have any control over. One of which is that even the modern stuff, the stuff that's only 2, 3, 4 years old, as Dave can attest, all of a sudden, Windows 10 is not a secure platform. And so the entire system has to be brought up to a higher level of security. And that's a requirement. Lots of dollars to do that, multiple buildings, lots of time involved. So some of these things that we're going to have, we're just going to have because, I don't know if anybody's still on Millennium and they're at home with their computer or on XP, but basically we're back in basically Windows 2000 with some of these systems, and we can't sustain it. And that's costing us money as far as the energy side of it is concerned as well. On top of that, I think that when we come looking to the LCIP for funding, I think we need to really be, you need to be conservative in where you put the money. I know Dingley is a historic building that everybody has this, it's like loving the old cat type of a scenario. But there comes a point in time when buildings are obsolete, or the cost of trying to sustain them is really not appropriate. As a relatively small building for a district the size of ours with the number of central office people that are there, it doesn't give us much of any opportunity to do anything else. Parking is at a real premium. I'd like to think that we could find a new home for the central office that was somewhere also remains in the downtown. We don't need to be putting, I know there's been discussion of several places, but we shouldn't be putting the central office out, behind Marden's or down below Phillips Elmet or somewhere so far out of town that it becomes inaccessible to the folks in those census districts that may not necessarily have access. So whatever we do as far as the central office, I think it needs to be sustained within the city center so that yes, it's a repository for our administration, but it also has to be a place where the people who are affected by it can access it. And I just think that we need to probably get creative of how we look at things, try to find some space. And if it was such that we could, I think that the 6, 7, 8 middle school is a great model. I don't see that happening right off. The middle school really is, unless we just take part of the LAP and, and just take it over and reduce the size of the fields, I don't see that there's any way of adding on there effectively without doing something like that. And then how big does the middle school become? I mean, does the middle school become a 12 or 1,300 kid school? Be nearly as the same size as the high school. I mean, to me, it becomes a challenge. We've already seen from this particular building, size does not necessarily make it better. This is wonderful space, but this is a challenge. We found that out the first year we opened. I think we're still experiencing it today. Bigger is not necessarily better. And so, some sort of, I think that policy of that is something that is really a long-term approach, probably well beyond any of us that may be even serving here before we see that happen. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be planning for it. And I think that one of the advantages of the LCIP is that it's a 5-year, 10-year planning document. We see stuff get bumped along. if you look back, I think if you look back to 2015, you would see the 3 fire substations start to appear in there. And so far, we've managed to get 1 built, and it's taken 6 years. So it was there, but it kept bumping along. The same is going to hold true with some of our projects. They're not going to get them all every year we're asking for them, but they have to keep reappearing. And that was one of the things that didn't happen for a very long time. We had several of the superintendents that basically almost just ignored it. And that put us behind the 8 ball. And Ron knows Auburn did the same thing. They just hoped that it would sort of cure itself, or just benign neglect that nobody would notice. Well, it doesn't work that way. And, you know, we have opportunity here. We have some great buildings, but we have some buildings that are really needy. And I think the idea here really is to identify the needy ones first, but not ignore the others. And, you know, replacing roofs and stuff like that is primary to however you sustain a building. Water is fact of life, but it's also a killer of buildings. We got to make sure that we take care of them.
Thank you. Member Bowden,
Can you hear me okay?
can you make it a little louder?
Yeah, I'll just come closer to it. Sorry. So Jake, you piqued my interest a little bit when you brought up the 6th, 7th, 8th grade middle school idea. And I think that perhaps like a restructuring of Lewiston Public Schools might need to happen in the future. Maybe we could come up with a subcommittee where we could start discussing the possibility of that. I know, for example, I would love to see Connors Elementary become 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. I think it makes a lot of sense where it's located and the size of it. But Bruce also has a great point in that bigger isn't always better. And, you know, it's definitely it's a challenge, but is that something that we could maybe start discussing?
I don't see why a subcommittee would be a bad idea. I think you're right. It is early in the conversation. And I think feasibility is something that needs to be, you know, talked about in different groupings. So I think that's something that could develop. Is that a school committee subcommittee? Chair Parks?
I would imagine so, or yes, or a superintendent's ad hoc committee
Or yeah, or even get some community members involved, parents that want to say, building admins. I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
any other discussion? No. All right. Were you complete with your part, Jake? All right. Agenda item number 8. Nope. Agenda item number 7, to set and vote on dates for the 2022 school committee calendar.
So I shared a memo, but I think this one is relatively brief, that some of the makeup of the school committee last winter had members that had other commitments, and for scheduling purposes, it was easier to move to weeks 2 and 4 instead of weeks 1 and 3 for school committee meetings. As we're looking at 22, no changes immediately, but we're finding that a lot of holidays and vacations and things of that nature are landing in the weeks as we project outward. And so what happens is, if it's week 3 that there's a challenge in the schedule, we move that meeting to week 4. And then we have a meeting back to back. And what I'm starting to sense is, from an agenda perspective, it's hard to give staff the time to pull together items when meetings are back to back. And then we have this gap because of a holiday. And so I was looking at getting that schedule modified. I think it would be a little better because of the different landings of dates that exist. It's not perfect. I think it's less disruptive to go 2 and 4 than 1 and 3. Excuse me, the other way around, the 1st and 3rd Monday instead of the 2nd and 4th, looking at the 22 calendar. But I'm not saying it's perfect. I just didn't know if the committee had thoughts on that, or if that's something you're okay with me moving forward with. If approved, I would still come up with a draft and get it back in front of you.
Any input from the committee? Member Damon?
Well, I don't disagree that there's been conflicts and there have been and there will be continue. I'm just not sure that this group that's here tonight ought to be the ones that are being asked. After tomorrow night, you could be talking to 5 other different people about their conflicts. So I would almost think that, it's all well, I think it's good to go ahead and produce the calendar showing first and third, but I'm not sure that we should be actually directing you to do that until we know who's actually going to be attending. That's only my thought. So.
I think it used to be the first and third, and we made an adjustment for members who were on this committee who are no longer on this committee. But I think traditionally it's been the first and third was the standard calendar.
Yeah, I will be here. So I would appreciate it going back to how it used to be, Jake. Because we know that we tried to accommodate Miss Ray's schedule because she was so busy. And that was great. But I don't think that we need that to continue with that. So I would love to see it go back.
Ms. Hawkins?
And I would just suggest that any members here who are in contact with people who are running for their seats, have this discussion with the possible incoming members, because it is something that's going to need to be on their radar.
Yeah, so the new committee in January will update their procedural rules that apply to that group as well. So even if we pass something today, it could change in January. Paul or Janet, do either of you have any input?
Can you speak?
Yes.
Okay, no, I agree with the points made here that we shouldn't put anything really on paper until we see the new committee, but it sounds very good. Thank you.
I would agree that we should probably wait for the new committee.
So I think with that input and knowing that there's an election tomorrow, we don't have to have a motion on this. I could just bring this back once we have a better understanding of what we have before us.
Perfect. Great, thank you. Agenda item number 8, to receive updates for the subcommittees. Have any of these subcommittees met since we last updated? Okay, great. First, we will go with Member Potvin for the Finance Committee.
So finance dived right into 3 particular issues of importance. And the first one we've already talked about in terms of the CIP and maintaining a number, keeping it steady. One other note that we made with CIP is, historically, when we looked at the budget, it seemed like there was a lot of ups and downs trying to figure out debt service. Sometimes there's a lot of debt service, sometimes not. And that's a challenge budgetary wise moving forward, and trying to plan, well, how much cost is there going to be? If CIP was a steady number that can be evaluated and reported out steadily on the debt service, then it's a lot easier for the planning stage, in terms of the finances. So that was one other note on the CIP. The second piece we talked about was the idea of developing a fund balance policy. We felt that we're at a critical junction right now for the school department, and there's no comprehensive fund balance policy. It's just been out there for committees of the past to either spend or not spend, and there's a lot that goes into it. And one piece is to be sustainable. And typically there's never been a balance left in there. And this year we broke the mold again in establishing at least 900,000 that was kept in, with everyone knows the incurring possible cliff, which it's probably not going to happen next year, but possibly the year after or the year after that. And how strong are you when it hits? And there should be a significant amount kept in that fund balance. And more importantly, how much you spend of it when you get it. And there's been way too much reliance on using the fund balance as a budgetary item of asset, coming in. And it's not. And the thing of it is, you can spend fund balance. Certainly it's there and you have to spend fund balance, but state allows us to keep 5%, not suggesting 5%, but we batted around the idea of, at least a basic minimum. That's the average fund balance over a 10-year span, so that there's consistency, there's stability. So you have a good number that you can work with. So A, moving forward with budgets, what you can spend or not spend. B, having an idea of, where you're at for long-term planning and so forth. So I think that, some sort of policy discussion, and we asked Jake to just start to bat it around for presentation to the whole committee, to adopt. Right now, are we still at a $7 million figure next year?
Yeah, they're working hard on the audit right now to close it up, but it's well over 6.
Yeah.
As anticipated right now.
And when budget time comes, it's going to be awfully tempting to be staring at that amount of money and not use it. And that leads into our third discussion we had in terms of expenditures. So we're not seeing any major changes. If you take a look at the natural predictable increases from the state each year over a period of time, $1.5 million to 2 million. We barely got 400,000 last year from the city of Lewiston for an increase. And we're already over almost $4 million in anticipated expenditures next year. So we already have a gap, and that's with using $5 million of the fund balance. So we made the suggestion that from here on in, if it can be worked out, that roughly we have to take a look at the positions, because we have the ongoing audit in our various departments. We have open positions now that remain high, that we're learning to do things differently. We may not want to keep all of them that way, but there's some workable, changes we could do. And we roughly estimated 15 positions for every $1 million. So if we talk about an item that could be $1 million item, that there should be a corresponding discussion of where 15 positions could be adjusted, how we could do it differently, because there's no revenue coming anywhere else. State's not going to give us a big gift. Everything from the federal is all grant money through the COVID, and we're trying to avoid that. The city is the city. You saw what we went through last year. I don't expect it to, all of a sudden everyone's going to be, yeah, sure. Hey, you want a couple $1 million? Sure. And so you gotta be realistic about what to expect from the city. And with that being said, the only other thing we can do is readjust our spending. And so I don't know if that would be part of the fund balance discussion or a whole separate discussion, but those are suggestions in trying to, and Paul's going to be staying on, but Linnea and I kind of want to leave a framework for the future finance committee to work in, where there's sustainability. There's not a lot of guesswork. You kind of understand what numbers are going to happen moving forward. And it's much more helpful when you have that for the planning stages. And for these past 2 years, we've always been kind of running by the hip, can we afford this? Can we do this? And, and I think if we have that vision and we understand what the cost for each thing is, and if it's doable, then, we can move it that way. And I mean, you can still ask for more money, but it's just the idea that I think that we have potential and opportunity right now with the personnel audits going on, that we might have potential to be able to find savings where maybe we can do things differently and we don't need certain positions. So, and that's what we came up with for that last meeting, and we'll we'll meet again for some sort of update and go from there.
Thank you. Facilities Committee, Mr. Damon?
Yeah, we have not met since the last report.
I do have a question. Whoops. Let me shut that off. I was just curious as to the wing at the preschool. There was like movement, there was like clearing out of stuff, and I'm kind of like excited to hear more about when that's supposed to be done and used.
So it's at an exciting phase right now. We're calling that supply chain. We've had some things that are dragging longer than we had wanted. Nothing to do with the crew that we're working with. They've done a great job. There's things like glass and steel and materials delays that have led, even with early ordering, into 6, 8, 10, sometimes 12-week delays. I know Bruce is in the field and he's seen some things that have been well into months, 6 months or things of that nature. So I actually feel like we're in a pretty good position. The next expansion committee meeting is the 16th of November. And I think right after that, we're going to be looking hard at when we might have a school committee meeting in that new space and do a tour. We're getting close. It's getting exciting. And did a walkthrough. We're looking at where whiteboards go and, things like that. So short of, flooring and molding, because they're waiting for windows to go in and this moisture hasn't helped, that's going to move very quickly. So over the next few weeks, we should be looking up at a transition that we were shooting for early November, maybe the second week of November, and it's probably looking at end of November, but we could be surprised. But people are starting to get excited, and that space is starting to feel usable and getting cleaned up and ready for use.
There was, I think, Jake, there was an update today from Jay Dufour up to the high school, and the meeting, I believe, was either 16th or 17th, and it's been pushed off to December 7th. Because they were really hoping to do that. Let me see if I can find it. So we are hoping to have a specific, walkthrough of the building for the school committee, the current one plus the new one coming in, so folks can really appreciate it. I know the people on the committee are very, very excited about it. So I think I believe that it's going to be moved to like December 7th. And so it is moving forward. Some of the delays that they've had are typical of everything in construction. We've had equipment that we used to get in 3 weeks that is now 30 weeks to get it. So nothing is as it used to be, to say the least, but I'm excited about it. I've walked it a couple of times, and it's going to be, I guess, it being the newest part of the building and being just really, the best word for this is cool space. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I'll keep everybody appraised of when that happens, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I know the expansion committee is too.
Thank you. Next is the curriculum committee with Member Bopalan.
Yes, thank you. I thank Member Potvin for his confidence, but there's no guarantee that I will be in office in January, such as the democracy and elections. For that reason, I've held off any preliminary conferences with Assistant Superintendent Paquette on a few issues that I need some clarity on and things that have been brought up. So I'm going to hold off on that till we see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. The next two are Member Whitlow, policy and then negotiations.
All right. So I was informed this week that we will be, well, I was informed a couple weeks ago that we'd be meeting as the policy committee on Wednesday, but the policies that we will be talking about are, there's 3 of them that were on the list. IJJ, which is instructional and library media materials. And then JKAA, use of physical restraint and seclusion, and JKAA-R, procedure on physical restraint and seclusion. I'm curious if that those last two would have anything to do with maybe what the former teacher was talking about with fighting, students and fighting and teachers having to pull people off of each other. I don't know, but I'd like to see how that connects with those concerns. So that'll be good. I also know, I'm hoping Jake can give me some insight on when we might be discussing more of the dress code policy. I think you have some information on that, correct?
Yeah, actually, principal at the middle school has helped generate a form that will be going out to as many venues as we can this week, so we can have input for a quick turnaround to bring it back to the policy committee to have input on hats, hoods, dress code. I will also mention that we've had some principals that have done some work in their schools around consistency related to the enforcement of the existing policy, which has helped alleviate some of the stressors that were mentioned prior. But I know this is a topic that Member Whitlow and Chair Parks have brought that they'd like to see before the board. So we'll get that going soon.
And that's all I have for the policy committee, the negotiations. And I know that we have been notified of the ed techs wanting to negotiate their contract. I'm assuming that we have responded to let them know that their intent has been acknowledged. So I don't know when we'll start that process. We are still waiting on some dates from the teacher's contract so that we can continue and finish that up. So we're just waiting to hear back from LEA on when those dates will work for us to finish that up. That would be nice. Preferably, we would like to at least get the ball rolling on the teacher contract before we start the ed tech, but we'll see how that plays out. I think that's it.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9 is report from the school committee chair. I do not have a report to give tonight. Agenda item number 10 is report from the superintendent.
A few notes here. I was going to share about the input for the dress code, which is what's happening. So we just mentioned that. Also concerns around recent shifts in our standard operating procedure. Gotten a lot of questions about how that works and where that lands. And it's included some things that I would consider to be some fallout from that decision. Unfortunately, Bangor chose not to come play. We've had another school choose to not come compete, and I've heard from a couple other schools that have inquired with the MPA if they choose not to compete against Lewiston schools, would that be a forfeiture on the behalf of Lewiston if we're not following the standard operating procedure guidelines? I don't have answers to those, other than I know that the questions are being asked. And so we're still continuing to navigate that component of shifting from the SOP. Just a quick COVID update, without going into great detail. I worked through a lot of phone calls today. We have a number of positives throughout our schools that are causing quarantine situations. For the first time in a long time, had a conversation today with 2 different principals that are saying, if this, then that, and talking about what does that mean if we don't have the staff to run school. And so we continue to navigate those. Vaccines are allowing people to stay at work and allowing students to stay in school. Also pool testing, which in case anyone's wondering, adult or students, pooled testing is something you can sign up for at any point in time. Principals have those resources. So if something you're interested in, please reach out. Pool testing and vaccinations are one of the other good ways to not have to quarantine from school. We still recommend quarantines outside of school as part of the CDC ruling on that. But again, we have a number of students who, because they're pool testing, even though they were close contacts, are allowed to continue to go to school. We've had, again, today was a busy day. We had a number of things. Pool testing is helping us catch some things early, but we've got some positives from over the weekend that we're still sorting through, including multiples in some schools. Geiger was identified as a outbreak site, which by rule, there's all language. And when I reference the standard operating procedure, if you go to the main.gov site and look in SOP, it gives you the whole listing of the rules that we follow. And day to day was found as who quarantines and when. I did get a question today from a parent around their student having to quarantine multiple times, even though they're participating in pool testing. The most recent case, and I'm sharing this for the general public to hear, in some of those cases, even if you are pool testing, if we don't have the staff to run certain things, we can't. And so we're keeping our eyes up on that. Update on busing, we still are operating short about 5 drivers. That may be 6 today. I think it's 5. But we are a skeleton crew right now from a busing standpoint. And I would say from a teaching and learning perspective, just being in the buildings, seeing some things over the last couple of weeks. Karen and I have both been in the schools, and we have a staffing shortage in schools, just like we have everywhere else. There's concerns around how many subs we can or cannot get, who's tested positive and can't be at work no matter what, and how that moves from day to day. And I'm not trying to escalate the conversation in any way, shape, or form, but we've had buildings that have been a dozen people short of the people they're already short. And so what that means is we're already operating short because we can't fill positions. Member Poffin referenced that. And again, that's not a Lewiston issue. It's nationwide from what I understand. But when we already have a chunk of positions that are not filled, we operate with less of a crew, if you will. And then when things pop up with cold, flu, sickness, COVID, or other obligations that people need a day for, it lands us short. And so we're asking a lot of our staff right now. And I want to be as real with people as I can be. It's hard work. They're doing a good job, but it is hard work. And everybody's operating short right now. So just a couple updates.
Member Whitlow?
Jake, could you just remind us how parents can sign their kids up for pool testing?
Sure. We have electronic signups that are available. Go to school websites. You should be able to find that. If not, I'd reach out to an administrator. We also have paper forms that can be filled out in multiple languages that have gone to administration. So if a family doesn't have access to electronics, they can fill that out and get that back to school, and we can work to get it logged in the system so they can join pool testing.
I'm sorry, maybe I totally missed it. Did you say it's on our website?
They're individualized by school, so they can check their school website or reach out to administrator of each school. There's codes for each one.
Mr. Potvin?
Jake, can you like run across what we heard tonight during public session? The angst, I guess, that, that sounds like it's being experienced in the school with between teachers, students, parents, etc. What is it that's creating burnout or fear? Is it COVID, dealing with the COVID? Is it short staffing? Is it the fact we're coming back full time and trying to get back into that swing of things? Is it a outside influence of, kids not getting along and bringing it into the school? What is precipitating the words as quoted, "It's not good right now"? And when I talked to a few teachers, I was really amazed this week where they just stare at you and they can't talk. They don't know what to say. And I was like, wow, this is like not good. And so what is precipitating this? And is there any direction we can go to address while we're still here? It sounds more like an immediate issue. Any of these particular issues that you may be seeing?
Well, I think D, all of the above. to be honest. We're not just seeing it at schools. I talked to employers who are saying they're seeing it at work in different settings entirely outside of schools. But I would say COVID is a piece, and all the things that go with COVID, the unpredictability, the ups and downs, the limited activities, or the taking away or reinstating different things for different kids and different platforms. I'm not a psychologist, but there's a lot of psychology in this. Fatigue is real, the COVID fatigue component. How that's impacted people in different ways, from a place of frustration. The example I often give, and I apologize to anyone who's hearing it again, but I think everybody operates, if you imagine a glass of water being half full, and your capacity to hold another half a glass of water, it varies person to person and by situations. But if you operate as a student or a teacher in the world of COVID, and that glass is half full, and then you find out that you might be a close contact, a little more water goes in that glass. And then you find out you got to do this thing for work, or you struggle on an assessment, a little more water goes in that glass. Then you take the bus home and that doesn't go great because it was running late. A little water goes in that glass. And you get to a point where the glass is running at full or close to full all the time. And the problem that we have when we don't do something to take some of that water out, which is a real challenge right now in the world of COVID and the pandemic, you're waiting for it to overflow. And I think there's a whole lot of people in society right now, whether it's politically, in the workplace, students, at home, who are operating on a place of that glass of water is running really, really close to full. And so emotions are pouring over, and it's when it spills over, it looks like a fight. It looks like a teacher just staring at the wall at the end of the day because they're exhausted and not sure what to do or which way is up. It turns into, we see it in PD sessions. We're here trying to help and deliver instructional professional development and learning opportunities for staff, and they're struggling to take it in. I recently shared an email with all of you. I didn't broadcast it out publicly, but we backed off one of our professional learning opportunities, especially at the younger grades, because people are just feeling like there's a lot right now. We actually met with the LEA recently, and we're talking about doing a survey together so that we can get more input from staff as to what can we do, how can we help, without plugging them into another training or another professional learning to add to what might be beneficial in the classroom or in those settings is also more time and commitment on the other end. So we're going to get more input, ask people how we can help. I've had a lot of thoughts lately about talking more so with parents and having more public sessions of some sort to say, here's some strategies with your kids in this environment, because I think parents are struggling too. But some of the things that we've seen, I know the high school's working hard with disrespect, and not that there hasn't been a couple fights, because I'm not giving you a number, but there have been some fights. And as a principal, both the middle and high school, I will tell you, with adolescents, fights do happen. Nobody here is blind to that. To think that I'd be the principal at the high school and I have a fight in the cafeteria, I'm not trying to predict at least one a year, but there will be a fight in the cafeteria. It's adolescents and kids are growing up. But the amount of disrespect and the comments back and not following direction is something that I think we have to continue to put resources to keep teaching people what the routines and expectations are. Because there's been a lapse, for 18 months, a whole lot of not much happened. And now kids are back in those spaces. They're struggling academically because there's gaps. They're struggling with different peer groups because they want to fit in and they want to belong. Fitting in and belonging today looks different than it did without a mask, without vaccines, without quarantines, without gaps in school because of those things. So I can go on and on. I think your question's a great one, but I think the first thing we need to do is start talking to our staff and inviting that input like we did last year, and try to problem solve the things that we get back from people. But I also think it's important for people to just slow down once in a while, try to pause where you can, and just navigate it. We're all in it together. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not easy. But I hope to bring things back to this committee with recommendations, working with the LEA to make some things, at least in the short term, a little better for them.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so I know that I've been informed of racial issues recently, and then the parent that came and spoke. I truly appreciate hearing all the things that are happening And I know these things are probably always happen. I understand that, but because of our push for equity and inclusion, I just want to know what the district is currently doing or planning to do as far as educating our staff, our students on racial equity. I'm not really sure that the term there, but I hope you know what I'm trying to inquire about.
That could be a real big answer. But I think the real short answer is we have to be brave enough to talk about it. We have to have the courage to look at a situation and dive into it and try to figure out what it means and what emotions it triggers and make sure that people know what things are okay and what things are not okay. I happen to be privy to, I think, the situations you're referencing, but I know that not everyone is. But I think we have an undeniable responsibility to continue to educate all of our community as a whole. It's not just teachers and kids. We we continue to meet and talk about that, and it's is that one of the things that if you leave it on the plate, it's another thing, and if you don't do it, what are you doing? You know, and I think that those are some of those really hard conversations. We took reading foundational work out at the elementary level because we don't know what else right now to say, let's just pause on this, not stopping, you know, not that we're not going to do it. But we're hearing teachers talk about regulation and helping the kids get back on track. And those conversations and conflicts all play into it. I think a lot of kids have to relearn how to do school. And I think there's a whole lot of kids that didn't forget, and they're doing just fine. But those who need to relearn the routines of school, they're struggling with the transition. And some of them are going to struggle for some time. I don't think it's a short-term fix. I think it's a commitment to having the courageous conversations and continuing the effort around equity, social emotional learning. And the challenges we talked today, actually, Karen, Sue, and I with Aisha about social emotional learning and what's the fastest way we can get that into people in a way that they can digest it so that they can implement it in the classroom without losing them to the conversation of this is just another thing. And so it's a challenge right now. It really is, especially when the mix of calls, a lot of principals are spending and nurses a lot of their day contact tracing and communicating with families that their students are close contacts and who is and who's not and who's vaccinated and who's got pooled testing. And it's better than last year, but it's still got some serious uphill challenges.
Member Damon?
Jake, just on a slightly different point, I know recently the FDA has approved
Can either of you hear me? Oh, okay, they can hear us. People walked away, Janet and Paul, to take a quick break while we were fixing it, so it'll be a couple more minutes before we get back on. Okay, members Bowden and Beauplant, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, we will continue. Sorry about that.
So when we paused there to make sure we had connectivity, Member Damon had asked about vaccine efforts with the recent endorsements, and I think that we're still one checkbox away, but I think it's about to happen. Everything that I'm hearing from local medical facilities is that efforts will be coordinated through the Auburn Mall. What we can do as a school department, I think, is find the parameters of that and see how we can help facilitate whatever we can. So once that gets adopted, it's got a feel out there, kind of reading between the lines, that things have already been ordered. They might even be on site as soon as there's an approval that it could be a rapidly accessible thing for those who wish to do it. So once we have more information, I'll definitely keep you posted. But right now, for those of you listening at home, the Auburn Mall is a good setup. I've seen it. I've brought families there. They'll get you in and out pretty quickly. They really have it nailed down. So be on the lookout for that.
I just wanted to follow up on one of the things you touched on, the adjustment that we made to the standard operating procedure at the last meeting. And I know that this has been said, but I just wanted to reiterate, I think it's appropriate that accurate messaging is going out about it, because I know that there's some misconceptions about what happened and the decision that we made. And there's been talk about potentially losing sports for the rest of the year and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify that that change that we made pertained only to outdoor sports. So it wouldn't, as it is right now, it wouldn't impact any of the winter sports that are indoors. And the goal of that was to keep kids in class and out of quarantine as much as possible. And it did continue to follow CDC guidelines. So I know that there's been some questions about the safety of other teams playing our students or the safety of our students. And I just wanted to clarify that it does still follow federal CDC guidelines. So we did not create an increased level of risk for any students in our district or from other districts. And I just wanted to make sure that that messaging was getting out, because I know that there was some misconceptions about the change that we made. That's all. Then agenda item number 11, our school committee community announcements. Does anyone have any community announcements? Mrs. Whitlow?
Just get out and vote tomorrow. That's all. City council, mayor, school board members, get out and vote.
All right, agenda item number 12 is future agenda items. I always look at Ron by default. Mike.
One, I guess I have a question on is taking up the whole quarantine piece that we talked about in the last meeting for the whole district in terms of reviewing that. And I guess I can see where the sports thing, since it involves other schools, there's a little friction, but in terms of within ourselves here, within our district, what can we look at and what recommendations are out there? And I'm just trying to think that maybe this is a this is a piece of trying to lighten the load a little bit, and the tension, lighten the tension a bit. So inside the schools, so that might be one piece besides everything else you're doing. So I think I'd like to see that as soon as we can.
Member Whitlow.
Yeah, I know a while ago we had a presentation on the solar power thing. If I could even, I don't know exactly what it was, but we were buying into a solar program or whatever. We had talked about bringing that back to the committee for a vote. And so I didn't know if we wanted to put that on an agenda so we can really discuss that.
So that went back and forth on different percentage rates after talking to some different schools, and they were not interested in getting to the percentage rate that I felt we should be at in comparison to other schools. There's also other vendors that are getting into that area, so maybe something we want to visit later. That was where that kind of fizzled.
Well, thank you for following up and trying to get a good rate and everything. I'm glad that we held off on voting that night then.
Member Damon.
Yeah, and on the solar thing, the city has also reached out to look for vendors to do what's called an ESCO, which is an energy services contract. And part of the request from the city actually involves putting a major solar array down at the landfill. And there's a good chance that the school department could jump on board with that project as well. So it would be a cooperative effort really between the city and the school department that hopefully might be even more beneficial for us because it's local. I mean, it's one thing to think that you're going to buy part of a 700-acre one up in the middle of nowhere in Farmington, but if it's one that's here, that's part of a cooperative effort between city and the school department, I think it's going to be a really, I think that's another opportunity that may be far better for us as a district. So that's going to be something that's coming along, and we'll see how that plays out, but I'm aware of that. So.
Thank you. Any other? No. Agenda item number 13 is to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with sorry. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Janet, I missed your hand.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. So I was just hoping, especially after hearing that parent come forward tonight speaking about bullying that's going on with her child, could we as a school committee maybe create a like a go-to list for parents for help, what steps they should be taking when they suspect their child's being bullied, who the appropriate adult they should be going to is. And I mean, maybe we can come up with some sort of resolution, to try to stop this from happening.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry about that again. Agenda item number 13 is to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with MRSA 4056A. Is there a
So
motion?
moved.
Second,
We're starting with Ward 4 tonight,
yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
and Ward 3.
Yes.
Thank you. The school committee is in executive session at 7:07 PM.